hikers, it's Mim here, and I am not coming to you from the trail on Walk the Yorke. I'm coming to you from the beautiful park at St Clair near our house in Adelaide. It's March. It's actually over 2 months since Mark and I came off trail on Walk the Yorke, and we've finally gotten round to doing a little explanation piece to go with our last day's video of the trail. So we did not finish Walk the Yorke. We finished up on day 13, and the reason for that I think is probably obvious from our other videos. It was the water insecurity on the trail. So on day 13 we walked out of Pondalowie campsite, which is in the Innes National Park, and we were heading towards Jim Beach. That was going to be our destination for the day, a short day, only 16 kilometres, but at that stage we really felt like we needed that short day. We were tired and pretty stressed about the water situation that we'd encountered on the trail. Fairly soon after we came out of Pondalowie, we walked past the surf beach there, and there was a big car park with some long drop toilets and a water tank. So we went to the water tank and turned on the tap, and there was kind of a dribble of water coming out. So we started to fill up our dirty bottle to filter some water for the day, and all of a sudden bees literally started coming out of the tank and into our dirty water bottle. So I guess this will demonstrate how desperate we were for water at that point, that despite the fact that I'm actually allergic to bees, we stood there and filled up our bottle with this really filthy, foul-smelling water that was bee infested, and stood there and filtered it and managed to get a couple of litres of water for the trail. We figured that that would be enough because it was only a 16-kilometre hike to Jim Beach and it wasn't a hot day, and we'd spoken to someone at the Yorke Peninsula Visitors Centre who had kind of assured us that when we got to Jim Beach there would be water in the tank there because it was less of a popular destination for car boot campers, and that we would be good to go for the rest of the trail. So we cheerfully hiked on to Jim Beach, which was the 16 kilometres and a really quite lovely walk actually. And when we got to Jim Beach it was really quite exposed and windy, not where I would have chosen to spend the rest of the day and evening, but we really weren't in the frame of mind to walk on, so we walked towards the long drop toilets, which are kind of a feature in the Innes National Park with water tanks attached to them, and there was a water tank stand there and no water tank. So we wandered around the rest of the campsite and couldn't find any evidence of an alternative water tank or water source. We came across a young couple who were packing up their car, and we asked them, hoping that they were familiar with the area. They weren't, but seemed to think there was no other water tank, and said that they were breaking camp and driving back to town so we could have what they had left of water, which was a 1.5 litre bottle of mercifully ice cold water, which was magnificent, and thank you guys so much. So we saddled up with that small amount of water and walked on to Formby Bay because we really didn't have any choice. At this point we were just over it, to be honest. We were exhausted, we were thirsty. We didn't take any footage on the last day because we were really so focused on getting to the next shelter and getting water that we had kind of lost all sense of what it was really like to be on the trail, and focusing on getting footage for ourselves and for everybody else. So we walked on to Formby Bay Shelter. It was a fairly tough but lovely walk, and it was, I think, about another 14 kilometres, so that ended up being a pretty big day, almost a 30-kilometre day. We did manage to have some really good experiences on that last section of the walk, the highlight for me being the fact that we stopped for lunch at the most gorgeous beach, and finally I managed to crack out my swimwear that I'd bought before we went on the trail and have a beautiful swim after lunch, so that was glorious. We walked on to Formby Bay. We got there. At that point, like, it sounds crazy, but I was really quite desperate and incredibly anxious and stressed out about the water situation, so I pelted running towards the shelter, which was beautifully decorated by a whole lot of young surfer peeps, I imagine, and got to the tank and it was bone dry. So we sat down at the shelter. Mark had run out of water and was overheated and quite distressed at that point. I was pretty distressed as well. And we had a quick conversation and realised that we had to call it. It was actually unsafe for us to continue walking with no access to a reliable water supply. We were tired and over it. And not only was it really potentially quite dangerous, we weren't enjoying the hike anymore because it was so stressful going from shelter to shelter and not having any water that we had actually stopped enjoying the hike, which was really disappointing. So we could see at the car park there at the shelter that there were a number of cars and people obviously down surfing at the beach. It was about 5:30 in the evening, so we figured people will be coming off the water soon and we'll be able to hitch a ride somewhere, anywhere nearby, so that we can hitchhike, do whatever we needed to do to get out of the situation that we were in. While we were sitting there, a car came down the road and Mark went over and sort of flagged them down. They were coming to park at the beach anyway, and a young couple got out. We explained our situation to them and they offered to take us back to their place or alternatively drive us into Corny Point. And we elected to go to Corny Point. They were happy to take us back, fill us up with water and pop us back on the trail if that's what we wanted. But at that point, honestly, we didn't want to keep hiking. We didn't think it was a safe or enjoyable idea for us at that point. So we agreed very happily to have them drive us to Corny Point. So we packed up, hopped into their car and off we went. We had a lovely chat with them along the way. Their names were Harry and Aurora. Thank you so much, guys, for picking us up in our hour of need, giving us water and driving us to Corny Point. And we got to Corny Point, drove past the caravan park where we intended to stay for the night, and they dropped us at the Howling Dog Tavern. So we sat down, had a beer, which was fantastic. Tried to use the internet to get in touch with my kids to let them know that we would need a pickup from the trail. No internet. So Mark managed to have a conversation with the lovely barman Lockie, who allowed us to hotspot to his phone, and we were able to get in touch with my sons Theo and Eamon and let them know what had happened. And Eamon, thank you kiddo, agreed to drive the almost 300 kilometres the next day to Corny Point to come and pick us up. So I then went for a short wander to the caravan park while Mark was ordering us some food to book a site for the night, to be told that they were booked out and had been for months and would be for several more weeks. And I was so over it at this point. I sort of threw myself on this guy's mercy and I said, well, where is there that we can, wild camp, bush camp, because we're stuck here. We don't have anywhere else to go. So he very thankfully, he allowed us to camp on the front lawn there at the caravan park. So we pitched tent, and even though it wasn't kind of a dedicated campsite, we were able to use all of the park facilities, which was great. I went back after organising that to the tavern to meet up with Mark, and our food was just kind of arriving at the table, and they didn't have any vegan options, sort of dedicated vegan options on the menu, but Mark had managed to order for us the tomato bruschetta without the feta, and some chips. And as I was sitting down, the chips arrived, and it was this enormous bowl of chips. Like when they say that it's a large bowl of chips, it's a large bowl of chips. And then our 2 servings of bruschetta. Now, I don't know about you, but when I order bruschetta, I kind of expect to get a couple of pieces of sourdough with some tomatoes and olive oil and onion on top. Well, what we actually got was this huge stack of wedges of bread topped with amazing tomato and fresh basil and onion. And because they'd taken the feta off, instead of just giving it to us as it was without the feta, they had replaced the feta with these huge chunks of beautiful soft creamy avocado, and it was the most enormous plate of food that I'd ever seen, and it was $7.50, which was really quite exceptional. So the food was great. The people at the Howling Dog Tavern were really welcoming and lovely. So we actually ended up having quite a pleasant evening there. And then we went back to the Corny Point Caravan Park and pitched our tent and had showers and did all of the stuff that dirty tired hikers do when they get into town. We stayed overnight at the Corny Point Caravan Park, and Eamon came to pick us up the next morning, and we had a really fantastic drive home. Actually, we went across, obviously, you know, as the crow flies, not the route that we had walked around the coastline, but across the inland middle section of the Yorke Peninsula, and went through some beautiful towns, and it was just glorious. We got home and then had the rest of our holiday at home. So that's it, I guess. Reflections on the trail. We had the most fantastic time. I really enjoyed walking the Yorke Peninsula, and I very much want to get back on trail and do that last 200 kilometres and maybe do the whole trail again, but from the other direction, coming from Moonta Bay for a different experience around to Port Wakefield. I don't know when we're going to do that. We don't have plans at this point because at this stage, the Yorke Peninsula Council, who we did contact after we came off trail, have no intentions of maintaining the water supply on that trail better than they currently do. And so from my point of view, we would just be going back into that incredibly stressful, anxious and potentially unsafe situation all over again. I do intend to follow up more assertively with the council, and I'll let you guys know what the outcome of that is. Thanks so much for watching.